Frontline.
There's talking behind comic scenes, behind the comic scenes. Mark, J, and Tim. It's the spin-off that has survived. There's no yawning to find the meaning. Is it good? Is it shite? G.I. Joe, Frontline on Talking Joe. Well, G.I. Joe, Frontline on Talking Joe. G.I. Joe, Frontline on Talking Joe. Well, G.I. Joe, Frontline on Talking Joe. Hey, welcome to Talking Joe. We are talking Frontline, and specifically we are looking back across the sweep of the entire 18 issues with the Golden Joe Awards. We'll be giving out some awards for our highlights and maybe a few lowlights, but we're going to be sweeping through it and joined by a few people to make that all happen. So let's give them a big Talking Joe intro as we do that. First up, it's Tim. I really want to talk Joe with you. It's a real American Tim.
Hello, viewers and listeners, and hi, Mark.
Hello, Tim. Good to have you with us once again, and on standby underneath your desk, as always, for when the call comes.
That's actually where I am the rest of the week.
Excellent. Who do we have next?
Do the Bartman. Everybody back and forth side to side. Do the Bartman. Wow, man.
Wow, man. It's the Bartman. It's our pal Bart, joining us from somewhere that looks slightly less like it might be a desert this time.
Yeah, I'm in my basement in Pittsburgh.
Excellent. And so how's things with you?
Pretty good. Literally, 10 minutes ago, my Valverse order just showed up, so that's a good day. Other than that, I started a new job on Monday, so working through that.
Wow.
Everything else is pretty much the same.
See, now you've given some context, because I was going to say you were just showing off your impressive package before we before we started. But and also you got those Valverse toys as well in the post, so that was good.
Yep.
So without too much further ado, let's see who the next person is waiting to join us. It's Richard, not Carol Straw.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's our main Devil's Due fan off of the Facebook groups, always in there with some, I'd say, pretty accurate and sensible opinions about what we're talking about.
Mr. J did tell me to tell you why you're all long, so I'm going to do that this time.
So we'll just wait for that to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. So, and then as we go along the show, we might also have some other people joining in with the fun. We shall see. But why are we here? This is why.
Oscars, Emmys, it's not about them shows. This award segment has Golden Joes.
It's the Golden Joe Awards. So we'll be having a few different categories looking at the run of Frontline with a critical eye as to what we thought about the books. So as we've been sort of reading in them along and discussing them, Bart and not Carol, What have been kind of what's been the temperature check for you guys? How have you been feeling about these issues, looking back on them 20 years later?
When I first read them, I thought they were interesting, pretty cool, except for the, was it Snowbound or whatever that one was? I felt was kind of a ripoff of a movie, but it was still kind of cool. I really haven't read them since they came out until like last week. I went back through and read them real quick. I mean, they're enjoyable. It got better as it went. Maybe if they had another 20 or 30 issues, They could have come up with something pretty good, but it was just all right.
I mean, I didn't
And
read
Richard?
these originally. I didn't read these
Really?
originally. I read them on sort of dodgy download a few years ago. I'm probably not allowed to say that. You know, as a spin-off goes, it's not special missions, but then I'm not saying special missions because that's the best G.I. Joe comic of the lot. But I'm kind of looking at the hit rate, and I think there's one storyline that's a disaster, but the rest of it, I like them. I will defend them. I mean, obviously, I will always defend them. There's one other that I put a comment on today that I don't think is very good. I just like the different feel, and unfortunately, I really do like the ice story. I think that's tremendous, but never mind. So, I've discovered them. I like the different feel of them. It's not all brilliant.
Excellent.
But, hey.
All right, let's get on into it. So first category is best cover. So what have we got for best covers? There was a lot of them. There wasn't just 18 because there was variant covers. So we're looking at almost 25 covers to choose from. And between myself and some of the comments that I got in, this is the short list that we came up with. We've got issue 1 by Dave Dorman, issue 5 and 8, I think that is, Tony Harris, and issue 11 from Tim. Please remind me, it's
Francis Manapul.
Francis Manapul.
We should give J.D. Metler credit for coloring 5 and 8 because he really is half of the work there.
Yes, that's a very valid point, Tim. The colours on those, a massive part of what makes them really pop. Yeah, what do we think of these? I think probably going into this, I would have thought that I would have naturally gravitated towards Dave Dorman, like his work from Star Wars and so on, and was very impressed when he was announced back in the day as the cover artist. But I think out of the lot and sort of with today's eyes, I think I would go with the number 5 from Tony Harris and Metler crew. Sort of just a very dynamic image and sort of just that color palette just, I think, really works for me.
When I was in college, I took an illustration class with a guy who had painted covers for some comics and a lot of paperback novels and some Magic the Gathering cards. And he talked about like what goes into illustrating the cover of a book. And when we read a lot of comics, particularly when the covers are more pinups or cool shots, I think sometimes we forget what goes into the thinking and the work that goes into telling a compelling story with one image and just drawing the best version of that concept. So issue number 5, whatever you think of the story, I think that sort of rises to the top of iconic Devil's Due covers. Emotionally, my favorite may not be on this list. It's probably Dave Dorman's painted cover for, is it issue number 3 with Snake Eyes Scarlet reflected in Jestro's mask? Because it's maybe the first time we'd ever seen that image pulled off that way. It's like we've seen things reflected, or in the case of that panel in issue 21, not reflected in Jestro's helmet. And though I do like Dorman's work on the cover to issue 1, I don't think the composition is his strongest. It looks like there's room left over for copy on the sides. So emotionally, it's issue 2, thank you. But in terms of like G.I. Joe, Harris and Metler on 5.
But
I went for number 8. To me, the angle that his head's tilted and the way he's holding that pistol looks pretty realistic, and just the artwork itself looks realistic. So I thought that was a pretty cool scene. It's kind of like he's got a guy on the ground, gun to his head kind of thing, giving him the old Dirty Harry.
If I can say one thing about 8 too, for a long time at Marvel, there was a rule that can't point guns out at the reader. And it's cool to see that with Frontline 8.
Excellent. Richard.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably say this a lot, but due to dithering, I didn't get my nominations in. So my favorite cover is actually 18 because it's mad, the roadblock figure one. But of these nominations, 5 by a mile. I mean, 8's a very nice picture, a piece of work, but it doesn't really say much about the story. Whereas 5's it's just thoroughly exciting, and I'm sure all the technical stuff about it is correct as well. But since I'm rubbish with art, it's just how I respond to it. And 5 is just by a mile the best cover of that. One of the best covers, full stop.
Richard,
and it got everybody very excited with that helicopter on the Facebook group.
Richard, could you spend a moment talking about 18, even though it's not here?
I only just listened to your podcast for 18 this morning, trying to catch up, and I just like the figure image. I like issue 18. It's totally utterly mad. Obviously, that's a discussion for another moment, and I just like the idea of the figure cover. You talk about it obviously on the podcast. I can see the technical things that you say about it. Absolutely fair enough, but I just think it's something that's in keeping with the sheer lunacy of that issue, and a bit ahead of its time. So I think the Star Wars comics, when Marvel took over, started doing these. I think they did the full picture on the cover rather than the idea of something in context. But I just respond to things that are stupid, basically.
What I did
not quite the right word.
What I didn't say about this cover in our episode on the issue, but I can say now, is this is the only G.I. Joe cover where we're in the real world, where we are looking at the product of G.I. Joe, and that hand is ours. Like, this is a POV shot, a point of view shot. So that is in keeping with the crazy of the issue.
Excellent. So I think with 3 of the 4 going to number 5, I think we have a clear winner for this one. So you're giving a round of applause there, Tim.
I'm imagining us shipping like a printout of the JPEG of the Chrome Storm Shadow figures to Tony Harris and to JD Metler, and they'll be like, "What?"
Yeah, well done, guys. It's I'm sure it's a career highlight for you. Well done. So next up, it's going to go on their LinkedIn profiles and everything. Next up, best new toy tie-in. So Frontline, it was, for the most part, it was people coming in telling the story that they particularly wanted to tell and having their play in the toy sandpit. So it wasn't a case of people being forced to use toys, but we did have a couple of new toys finding their way there. So we've got the Snowcat version 2 there, which is bonkers. It's got it's, for the most part, it is very similar to the original Snowcat, with this kind of urban camo pattern on it, and blue missiles, but then with an additional missile rack right on the top, which is quite lovely, bonkers. Then the other toy tie-in, who appeared in the last Golden Joes as well, was Crosshair. So this was Brandon Joe as a writer, really embracing what's going on in the toy universe at the time, and bringing in one of these new characters, who I think he probably also wrote into the issue 25 or whenever it was that he cropped up in the main run. So then we've also got Frostbite. So in the Icebound run, Frostbite came in without beard or moustache, but being based on the look of his new G.I. Joe versus Cobra look, with that chunky sort of 5 points of articulation to him, and in the issue being given a bit, fleshing out his character a little bit more, sort of coming in with his interesting stories, and being given the nickname Sad Storio by Airtight. So that is. Oh, and then we had a special nomination from Bart. Bart, do you want to talk to this one?
It's not a new toy or anything like that, but they colored it black, and I just thought that was cool. Everything else that I had seen, the characters, like the Snowcat's basically just a Snowcat with a new missile on top. Nothing really jumped out at me other than this. I think they colored another vehicle black or something or whatever, but I just thought that was really cool, like a stealthy companion to the Night Raven kind of thing with the Condor.
Yeah, and in the story itself, they kind of missed some of the toyetic components of the Condor, because the Condor was damaged, but instead of using the ability to kind of shoot the front off as a separate vehicle, he just continued on back to base. But oh well, never mind. So there we go. There's the 3 shown, but with an extra one on the end that I forgot to add on. What are we going for the vote? I think I'm swung over by Bart. It's not necessarily a toy, but it's great to see the Condor sort of crop into the story after not being used an enormous amount in the books. So why not? I'll give it my vote. Let's go descending order down. Tim, you next.
I'm going to respectfully not vote. It's not a protest. None of these move me as examples of new product. So with the Snowcat, it's like the Transformers Generation 2 thing where you take a toy from the 80s and then you put a shooting weapon on top of it, which sort of ruins its lines. Crosshair is a cool figure, but I have no connection to that character. And when I look at it, I just see what should be Muskrat. And same with Frostbite. I look at that and it's like, no, that's a new version of Blizzard. Like clearly someone got the name wrong, or there was a legal issue for that year. So respectfully, I'm not voting this round. But it's not with my like trademark Frontline Devils Do Frown.
Okay, Bart.
It has to be the Condor. I mean, I love this Snowcat. I've got a bunch of them. It's my favorite thing to go to for customs, but just that Condor with the stealth paint just kind of set it off for me.
So, Richard.
Yeah, I'd vote for him in any category at any time. Crosshair. Frostbite's not Frostbite. Yeah. It's obviously not. And the Snowcat's it's rubbish.
Best female, Crosshair. Best cover, Crosshair.
Yeah. I'm glad he's appeared because, like I say, I didn't get me nominations. But I know I'm fighting a losing battle. But he's a tremendous figure, and he was the one that really got me when I was rebuying toys in the early 2000s. So.
Remind me, who, the figure is a likeness of someone, right? Someone at Hasbro or a fan, or he's named after someone. Am I remembering this correctly?
I cannot remember. I think we're stumped on that one.
This is where some live comments from viewers would be amazing. Tell me how dumb I am for not knowing this already. I'm pretty sure that is someone. And if you watch this one day, someone, I'm sorry for not knowing. And that's fun. You know, Frostbite is definitely not someone. It's not a likeness.
If you know who Crosshair is based on, type it in the comments, and we can tell Tim how foolish we've all been made to look. Never mind. Okay, so I think the Condor, which is the one not on this picture, is the one that just edges it, and is also not a new toy. But never mind. We make up the rules as we go along. That's so. Best interior artist, Dan Jurgens, who did the first art with Larry Hama. Eddie Barrows, so really starting off his career on G.I. Joe Frontline before going on to superstardom on some of the DC books in more recent years. Tim Seeley, and then Drew Johnson, who drew most of the first 3 issues of the Icebound arc, but also working with some other artists doing guest art on the last issue, and was it Tom Feister, I think, doing the most of the flashback components of that story. So let's maybe work up from the bottom. Let's start with Richard.
Well, I would say Tim Seeley, but what you said in the podcast, he's not necessarily the right person for that one, particularly the drawing of the villains in that story. I will agree, it was peculiar. So actually, even though I've got 1 or 2 issues with the certain visual presentations of the first arc, I'd actually go with Dan. Is it Jurgens or Jurgens? Dan Jurgens for this.
Huh.
I like his art. I like it's got a sort of broadness to it. You know, I don't get worked up about art sometimes unless it's absolutely appalling. But certainly of those 4, easily in this case. It'll be Tim Seeley any other time of the day, but not in this context.
Okay, Bart.
It was really close for me. I like Tim Seeley's stuff. I've hung out with him before, watched him draw some stuff, and it like blows your mind. But to me, Dan Jurgens was just a little bit more refined, a little bit more crisper, and that's what got my vote. I mean, it was real close, but I had to go with Jurgens.
So, pound for pound for me, Drew Johnson is the halfway point between the sort of old school 80s Marvel art that a Dan Jurgens represents, the Ron Wagner, the Rod Wiggum. He's sort of halfway between that and the slicker, flashier art of like 2000s comics, like Image Comics. But Dan Jurgens is someone who, in my mind, always should have been drawing G.I. Joe, because he draws like a Ron Wagner, like a Rod Wiggum, like a Mark Bright. He's in that school. And though this arc is not his best work, and as you may recall, I didn't love the coloring in the arc, though I should say I didn't love half of the coloring in the arc and the story itself. What a thrill it is to see this artist draw this book, sort of finally. So Dan Jurgens.
I think we might have a clean sweep, because until I thought about this question, I didn't think it probably would be Dan Jurgens, because that first arc did have its flaws, but he's one of these artists who you think, yeah, of course, he would draw G.I. Joe. It's he's very much in that style of the classic G.I. Joe artist, and there is something very satisfying about seeing him draw G.I. Joe. But I think all of the runner-ups on this slide share, have a well-deserved almost second place here. That I think they equipped themselves well. I think generally the art between these guys was good.
Does that mean we're sending a golden Storm Shadow to Jurgens and a silver Storm Shadow? They're the other thrhi?
I think so. I think that must be what happens.
This is early in Seeley's career too. I mean, he's only gotten better since. I remember telling him one time, like, how amazed I was with his stuff and everything, and he's like, "Why do people keep saying that?" He's like, "I'm new to this. I'm just starting out." And it's like, well, dude, your stuff's good.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I look forward to sort of, as we progress through the next few issues of the main run, starting with 26, to see more of Seeley and how he develops in this early stage of his career. To Dan Jurgens. Your statuette is in the post.
I think after
to Drew Johnson for you're doing so well on Icebound, you get an honorary snowstorm. There we go.
I bet after writing and drawing Superman for like 7 years, launching a new Spider-Man book in the middle of the Clone saga, I bet if someone could tell Dan Jurgens that 4 men think that he's the best G.I. Joe spin-off artist of the middle 2000s, I think he'd be really moved by that.
he probably would.
He'd probably say, "I drew that? When did I do that?"
Okay. And if you're watching, feel free to sound off with your nominations or who you think should have won it in the comments as well. So next up, what do we have? It's Best Joe Character. Ooh. So we have got Flash. We have got Duke there. We in part I think adding Duke there because we did have a special guest who was due to join us, who hasn't, who would have appreciated him being there. So then we've got Chuckles, obviously the lead character in that history repeating arc, and also Beachhead, who saw a rare spotlight in his solo. Let's start with Flash and Bart. So you nominated Flash to be up here. Why was that?
It's kind of like the Queen song. He saved every one of us. He grabs the bazooka, he runs out there and blows some crap up. Plus, he's not a guy that you see too often, but he was very heroic. He just stood out to me through most of the issues. I mean, Beachhead's doing the Beachhead thing from the cartoon, and Duke's just Duke. Chuckles, I've never been a huge fan of his. I think he's kind of overrated. That's just me. So Flash being the oddball that, did something different other than just poking his laser rifle at something, I thought was pretty cool.
Cool. These slides have just been updated to disavow Duke.
I was going to vote for him.
You're not voting for Crosshair?
Okay, you can have him back. You can have him back.
I wonder if Mark, by showing two of these characters from their covers and not interior panels, if inadvertently, without meaning to, you're putting the thumb on the scale. Because like, what's more impressive than this drawing of Duke and this drawing of Chuckles that have already, these specific drawings have already been nominated for a different award. But I also understand putting together a slideshow is a lot of work. I'm going to vote for Chuckles, even though that arc has a strange halfway point. We got a cool explanation from the writer, and I think Chuckles is an endlessly interesting and usable character in G.I. Joe, and since he doesn't do much in the animated movie and all of the animation, and what he does sort of doesn't make sense. With the missile, throwing the missile, which hasn't been armed. I also like that this story, and this may sound like an unfair comparison, but I see it as a cool sort of progression of G.I. Joe storytelling. This story sort of looks ahead to the last laugh at Devil's Due. But my vote is for Chuckles.
Yeah, I think you said it all there, Tim. I absolutely agree. For me, it's Chuckles, a character that didn't really get a huge amount of time in the original run. Established him as a real interesting character in the pages of the comics, and really acted as a precursor to then the Last Laugh Cobra story that IDW followed up with a number of years later. So for me, Chuckles. So Richard, I think you might have just tipped your hat earlier as to where you might be voting. But...
I was lying. No, it would be Chuckles. Actually, that's a story that I wasn't that keen on initially. I actually kind of like it a bit more after listening to the show about it. And Chuckles had the worst introduction ever, primarily because of the appalling artwork on that issue that he made his first appearance in, where his arm muscles are bigger than his head, I think it was. And I just, oh dear. And this story, it's obviously I'm talking about the story as much as anything. It's a bit of a weird, wide-ranging, chuck everything at the screen story, but it actually works as his character to. What am I trying to say? I'm not even sure what I'm trying to say. It's Chuckles, basically. I do like him, and I do like him in that story in particular, but that story is so shaped around a character who I wouldn't otherwise care for. Yes, I'm afraid it is Chuckles as well.
To Richard's earlier point about issue 18 and Roadblock and liking the mad G.I. Joe stuff, just the character of Chuckles, just that action figure, like Hasbro was not punking us in 1987. But Hasbro was definitely having some fun with that character. It's like he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt that will never not be funny and strange, but also quite fitting, right? It's like he's undercover. Like, how do you play with action figures where like their clothes don't come off like the 60s Joe, right? It's like, because an undercover figure would look like any other figure. He'd look like Snake Eyes, he'd look like Duke, just in terms of, from the neck down. So like Hawaiian shirt, yes.
Don Johnson did it.
It's the Bond equivalent it's the equivalent of Bond's tuxedo. You recognize him instantly. So he's going to be a terrible undercover agent, but
but that's the conceit, It's the same way that like, well, all these guys with no jackets and shirts are going to be in the Arctic for this mission. Yeah, that's what they wear.
Yep, that's where we're going. So best baddie, and I've intentionally gone for the word baddie because it's a cool word, but also as a run, I originally titled it Best Cobra, but sort of flicking through the issues again, I was thinking actually the strongest adversaries in these issues are not necessarily the Cobras. It's the other characters. So we've gone for everyone's favorite, Mad Anthony. It's Zanya. It's Wingfield's Saturday Night and Night Creeper. There from the issue that we most recently published just last week. So last week as I speak live, not last week as this goes out. If you're listening late, but you get the point.
Time travel.
Yeah. So where should we go first? Tim, why don't you start us?
Wingfield in this arc with Chuckles is probably the strongest writing of these four. And I don't like Zanya. I don't like sort of what she represents, the aging of the characters. You know, if you're gonna, it's like, no, just make Zorana really interesting. But these two issues with her cover a lot of interesting ground. And even though I don't like the character and I don't want her part of the G.I. Joe mythos and I don't want her to have an action figure, I'm going to pick Zanya because these two issues did what the main series should have been doing. You know, if everyone likes her this much and she's this interesting and this important, give her some backstory and have her interact with the Dreadnoks. So Zanya.
Very good. I'll pop in next. I think I'm going Wigfield. So new character, substantial arc, playing into an interesting story and and in terms of, I guess I'm trying to think of the right word, but in terms of sort of the generational aspect of G.I. Joe, of moving it on, that we've obviously got the father figure in very early issue of G.I. Joe, and then the son in this one. I think that's a more interesting. It was carried out in a more interesting way than maybe the Zartan Zanya kind of relationship. So yeah, that's going to go Wingfield. But
I picked Wingfield also. He's new. I think he had the most potential of growth. He was in 4 issues. I could have seen his character develop over a whole run of throughout a year. Him just be a thorn in their side, kind of like a new Cobra Commander kind of thing. We don't know him. We're learning about him, but we do know him because we know what happened with his father and his mother. So they don't have to do a whole lot of backstory on him per se, because we already know where he's come from. And they could have just moved right straight into the action from there and made him really badass. So I picked him.
Cool. Richard?
Yes, I notice how nobody wants the two at each end. Wingfield, I've got a problem with. I always think if you want to tell a story that links back to something, I'm always a bit cherry on bringing children of characters in, which is ironic about what I'm about to say. If you're going to bring Wingfield back, just bring Wingfield back. He was only shot in the back of the head. He might have survived. I'm not sure it works. He's not a bad character, but actually I'll go for Zanya, considering she's the daughter of another character, because actually that's what I like. I'm afraid I'm a complete opposite to Mr. Finn, in that I like the aging and I like what she represents and I like that story. And I think it's debatable whether she is a baddie in that story. She is the hero of her own story. And I just like the character, and I think that story obviously way off beast for standard G.I. Joe, and I think she comes out of it very well. So I'm going to throw it to a draw with Zanya, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think there is a hint in the story that in the flashbacks that she burnt down her mother and her mother and stepfather's flat or house apartment,
for that,
and
really.
Might have killed them a little bit. But apart from that, I think generally she came off in a fairly heroic way, I guess.
Anti-heroic, perhaps.
Anti-heroic, yeah.
Something that's interesting about Wingfield is that he represents sort of a new and different level of domestic terrorist, which is part of the sort of ongoing G.I. Joe story. You know, there's Cobra Commander in the flashbacks when he's building himself up. There's Cobra Commander now, where he's got this worldwide army. There's the original Wingfield, who's sort of what we consider now like very much a domestic terrorist. And then you have his son, who's sort of later and ramping that up in a little bit. And Bart makes a good point about how had he stuck around for a year, he could have been another kind of ongoing antagonist, the way that I was thinking like Dr. Venom has been in the comics, or, you know, like we sort of maybe imagined that the Overlord would have been had he been brought in sort of properly back in the 80s. But yes, interesting how none of us voted for the two folks on the outside.
So I think we've got a draw there. So Zanya and Wingfield in close contention. We'll leave it at a draw, I think.
I think that means fireworks and snow at the same time.
Somebody's got to cut the O-ring on that figure, and everybody gets a half.
Biblical, yeah. So, best story. Oh, interesting. So, we have gone for nominations. The Mission That Never Was, so the opening arc. Icebound, with the image there being the trade paperback cover. Family History, the 2-part Zanya story. And the 4-part History Repeating, featuring Chuckles, and the story that Brandon Jerwa made his introduction into the comic industry on. So, who wants to start? Richard.
Just not The Mission That Never Was. I hate that. I'm sorry, but I really hate it. Icebound. Oh, sorry. Give me a moment. I have a bit. Just give me a moment, sweetheart. Sorry,
Okay,
Does somebody else want to step in, please?
I'll pop you out a second. Okay, so for me, it's probably a slight toss-up between Icebound and History Repeating. I think Icebound did have quite a lot of tropes in there, and sort of alluding to the likes of The Thing and so on. But it was its own thing as well, and I think it was well done. Quite a different sort of story to other Joe stories, but not to its detriment. But I think probably nostalgia factor here, History Repeating was definitely the art that I enjoyed most at the time out of these, and I think it is still a solid piece of work. And although I didn't nominate in the end the artist for my favorite artist, I think again for an artist starting out in their career, very strong art indeed. So I think I will it just edges it out. History Repeating will be my vote.
Sorry about that.
Tim or Richard, do you want to finish your thoughts?
Just Icebound. It would come down to Icebound or History Repeating, and I loved the sort of explanation that these were sort of very contrasting pitches to taking over. One very contained, and one a huge sprawling epic. Icebound is just great fun. It's mad. Again, mad. I like the mad stuff. And I'm content that these polar bear things are definitely the mega marine, was it monster vipers? I think they're meant to be a hat to that, and I love mega marines. So this is the closest it's ever got. So yes, Icebound.
Okay. Bart, why don't you go next?
Pretty much everything you said. Icebound was a lot of fun, but to me it was too much of a ripoff of a movie. So just as like an entertaining story, it was cool, but my vote was for History Repeating because it was more entertaining in that world. Icebound to me is kind of like a special missions, off to the side kind of thing, where History Repeating is establishing this Frontline world kind of thing.
Yeah, get that more world building. Yeah.
Bart, that's a good observation that Icebound is basically a 4-issue special missions issue. In my memory, when I am months or years away from reading these comics, I think back to The Mission That Never Was, and I think, oh, right, there's sort of that lost Larry Hama story with that cool, like, old school art. Like, don't I love that story? And then I remember, A, I don't, and B, Larry Hama doesn't love that story, and he has said so, and he has said so nicely. So I'm just going to repeat everyone. I'm just going to History Repeating everyone. I think Icebound is a better story, but History Repeating is a better G.I. Joe story.
Excellent stuff. So history repeating, I think, is definitely the one there that takes it. Well done to
And
the team.
I think you need to repeat that fireworks graphic. I can't. Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
I like Icebound because I've never seen the thing. Which is what I assume it's a rip-off of.
That's a fair point.
Okay. Checking.
Could be. Most amusing scene next. So first one here was Chuckles wisecracking. So I don't know if you can quite work it out on the story on the screen there, but this is this isn't this isn't Chuckles' line at all. He's in the back of the van. It's Xandar talking. It says, "Be careful patting yourself on the back, Wingfield. One of these days you might just break your arm." Yeah, it's not Chuckles' wisecrack, but it's there to illustrate the kind of wisecracking that Chuckles was making, if I can stretch my nomination a little bit there. The next one up is Mrs. Dimples and her projectile vomit. Some people may agree, some people may disagree. Then we have Beachhead with his potato. Bart, are you able to read that in your best drill instructor voice?
Let's see. I bet you don't think I got much more than the army in my head, huh? I bet you think old Beachhead ain't too clever. Well, anyone else would have cleaned this place up with a toothbrush or something. This, on the other hand, is a potato.
Thank you, Bart. So Beachhead and his potato. And next up, we have a nomination from you, Bart. Flash with the bazooka. So yeah, you to explain why this should be on the shortlist for most amusing.
Because you typically think of him as the laser guy. He's just gonna burn a hole in something or laser spot something for artillery. But he's just like, I'm not doing nothing. Let me grab this bazooka, and he runs out there and blows some stuff up, and he just looks cool doing it. So to me, it was just a lot of fun to see a guy that's not a bazooka soldier but knows how to work a bazooka goes and blows some crap up.
This is a nice point, because to a great degree, many of the Joes can do what many of the other Joes can do. Like if you're on an Arctic mission, either it should be only Arctic guys or led by an Arctic guy. And if you need someone to like shoot a precise hole far away or spot for someone else, but like all of them know how to use machine guns, and all of them know how to throw grenades, even if somewhere we have like a grenadier.
And they all know how to fly skystrakers as well. That's the great thing.
Yes, even though only a handful are actually pilots. Wait a minute. Are you explaining? Wait, are you telling me that G.I. Joe doesn't work?
Sorry, Tim.
We've
all been terribly wrong all this time.
Are we shucking the metaphor and it sort of falls apart?
Oh dear. So let's go. Quick fire voting for this, and if you're watching live, feel free to type away, put in your little comment for who you think should win as well. I think I'm going to go potato. Potato.
Flash.
Potato, but only because you've left out the best Beachhead scene, which is press ups under fire. But definitely potato. I could have nominated it.
And for our non-British fans, push-ups under fire.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that.
What? I just don't get it. Yeah.
Drop it. Give me.
Okay. So best artist reference is next up. So this is one of Tim's observations. Jetfire Sky Striker, and I think we did have a slightly fuzzy confirmation from Dan Jolly, who thought that the artist did keep Jetfire toy on his desk at the time. So there we go. That's from the first issue of the Icebound arc. Next up, it is the World Peacekeeper Little Bird toy, which has those distinctive red missiles on the rack, which carried through from toy to art. Very popular G.I. Joe adjacent toy there. Kind of thing that someone like Bart would get and customize and
I've already
that
done.
kind of thing. Yeah.
It's from my October guard.
Oh, excellent. Lovely. And what next do we have? Oh, so we just got a short list of 2 on this one. I'm going to go Little Bird all the way. You know, just excellent use of reference to create an incredible image there without it looking like a duff Photoshop job, which sometimes these things can do.
I'm going to agree. I don't know if the Jetfire toy. I don't think it's a traced photo, but it is so careful and clean as to look sort of too careful and clean. Whereas what Harris is doing with the helicopter is he's slightly warping it in perspective, where it's a little bit wider in the front and a little bit narrower in the back, and he's drawing it from a difficult angle, so that drawing shows a lot of artist chops. And whether he's taking a photo and drawing it or holding it in front of his hand and drawing it, he's doing a lot of work.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, that helicopter, it looks very good as an SAS, Action Force SAS helicopter, I might say, because there's one in storage with the stickers on, and it just looks great on that cover. So, yeah, not even a competition on this occasion.
I don't know. I picked Jetfire only because that's my favorite Transformer, and I'm a big Robotech fan. So I got to pick Jetfire.
Does that mean that you have a Robotech toy of this also?
I have all the Transformer Jetfires. I don't have any Robotechs. I watched the show as a kid, but I didn't even know there was action figures. And to get one of those now is kind of pricey. So it's on my want list.
Hey, what do we have next? We have got Best Nitpick, and we've also got a late addition to this, which we didn't spot for the show. So this is my late addition. So Frontline cover to issue 17. I think the artist is Jason Alexander. Guys, can you tell what my nitpick is?
There's no second strap for the holster.
I think it kind of is there, sort of down on the shoulder and across. Yeah, I think that's not it. And it's not that he's a ghost that sort of dissipates into nothingness at the end. That's fine. That's just an artistic choice.
Are the stars too big?
They are a little bit, aren't they?
Could you not fit 50 stars on that blue field at that size for the stars?
I think you would struggle.
This is. I want to say to Mr. Alexander, this is a really good painting. So,
I think it will become apparent when I show the original way that he actually painted it.
That's what I thought. It was flip flops
like this.
Oh,
because he's not.
The image has flopped, as Bart has described it. So this is the way it was painted, and they flipped it around for the printed cover, which creates 2 little niggles for me. The first of which is that the flag's it's back to front as well. So that's not how the American flag looks with the stars and stripes in the corner.
And then his holster is now on the wrong side for a figure reference.
his holster would be on, unless he was a lefty, wouldn't he? So that's a good second nitpick that I hadn't thought of, Tim. My other one was that it then means that the thing that it's referencing is less strong as well, because the "I Want You" for the U.S. Army poster is pointing with that same finger, and it's again that is also flipped around.
So in drawing and painting, you can flop a piece of art. With photographs, it's not a good idea, because we as people, our faces are not perfectly symmetrical. Like your one eye might be a little larger, a little higher, and if you know someone really well and you see a photograph of them and it's been flopped, you may subtly think like, wait, what's wrong with that person that I know? Because you're seeing them sort of actually not how they are in real life. So Except for these nitpicks, I am okay with flopping artwork. Also, I feel like sometimes it might have to do with like where they want to place the barcode.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
A late entry there. So first one up is a write-in nomination from Bart. Roadblock is too big. So this is interesting as well, because on our recording for this particular issue, a certain Mr. Tim Finn notes how much he enjoys the fact that in this issue Roadblock is drawn as a big guy. So we've got some. We've got some tension here between two of our guests today. One who thinks he's too big, and one who likes the fact that he's drawn bigger than usual. So, Bart, do you want to start with your case?
Well, it's not his width; it's his height. Me myself, I'm 6'6", so I've got a perspective on this. But with her being Asian, you could say she's maybe 5 foot. Even if he was my height, he's like towering over her. And I looked at a couple different pictures of this with him next to other people, and like the guy in the background, if that guy's 6 foot, Roadblock is still like 1.5 feet taller than that guy in perspective. So he's just way too tall. I mean, I get the muscles, he could be The Rock or whatever, but it's his height. He was just way too tall. But this whole issue is just one big silly goof. So, I mean, it's okay, but yeah, he's just too tall for me.
I'll half agree and half disagree with Bart. What Dan Norton is doing here in drawing this version of Roadblock is he's drawing the Michael Golden version of Roadblock from your book 2, like the back cover and I guess also the front cover. And that's a version of Roadblock that I want to see. But when I read the issue, I did think, he's kind of too tall. I think he's got the width right, but even at it sort of exaggerated cartooning, he's a little too tall. I don't mind, because I don't mind this kind of exaggeration in artwork, but I think Bart is technically correct.
Uh-oh. Do I get an award?
Oh, sorry. Mike Norton. Thank you. Not Dave Norton, Dan Norton. Mike Norton drew this issue. Mike Norton is drawing the Michael Golden version of Roadblock here. But I am interested in what the other options are to vote.
Okay, next up we have a shiny pot of coffee. So, as often as we've seen in the Devil's Due era, particularly these early issues, the colouring technique is often highlighting maybe the wrong things or colouring in a very aggressive way, such that everything has very intense light sources on them. So here we go, singled out. The most important thing on the page are these canisters of coffee.
Oh, Scarlett's got some bling on there too. Her dog tags and belt buckle. Snake Eyes has got a visor. Lifeline has got his goggles. There's all sorts of bling going on, but particularly the coffee.
In this version of this panel, Mark, I'm not sure quite how you sourced this panel. If this is like a screen cap from a digital version, or if you scanned your comic and then so and so. But everyone will probably see like some crazy neon green next to Scarlett's leg, and Hawk coming in, his face is purple, and the window, the screens behind them are pink and purple. And this is not how the actual coloring appears in the printed version or in a digital version. So this is
the saturation's a bit off on it and stuff.
So if the shiny pot of coffee doesn't seem like a big deal compared to everything else that's crazy about this panel, trust me, the shiny pot of coffee is a pretty big deal. But I don't know if I'm voting for this yet.
So next up, we have the necklace changing color from the Night Creeper issue. So we have an establishing shot of a guy with a sword or a knife at his throat, with a sort of silverish, grayish necklace, and then on the next page, that is being cut out of context, and it's a different color, and we were all a bit like, huh? What's that panel trying to suggest, and why is it suddenly showing us a necklace that we've never seen before? Refer back to our issue issue 17 podcast for in-depth discussion.
Bart, how would you no prize that?
It's glint off the knife is washing out the gold color on the necklace.
I'm going to vote. These are the options, right? There are no more.
Last final one. Oh, here we go. It is Tim Finn special. Guns are not flashlights. Do you want to explain this one, Tim?
I don't remember saying it, but that certainly sounds like something I would say. Color artists starting around 1992 with the advent of Photoshop and comic books, some color artists went nuts with highlights and lens flares. And I'm all for a yellow like illumination of muzzle flash from guns. I love that in all the Mike Zeck Marvel covers. And actually, that's when I draw guns shooting. I'm trying to draw the Mike Zeck yellow and red, from like the cover of 47. But these are not flashlight laser beam guns. These
in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so is that one the last one? I think it might be. Oh, no, here we go. There's one more. It's Night Creeper teleportation. So from the Night Creeper issue, he's disappearing off in a cloud of pink smoke. And I said at the time that I think the artist might have confused Night Creeper with Night Crawler. Tim thought that he might be exploding and that his helmet is all left after a grisly grisly kind of explosion.
It's actually that he's thrown down a smoke bomb, right? And he disappears and we don't see it.
Yeah. So it should be more akin to the kind of effect that you'd see from a smoke bomb. It just is a little bit confusing.
I'm having a hard time between voting for the necklace and this Night Creeper teleportation because both of them slightly obscure the story, whereas the other ones are just like coloring choices or errors. But I think since the Night Creeper one is at the climax of the story and sort of the obfuscation of the narrative is happening in a bigger way, I'll vote for that one. I vote Night Creeper teleportation.
Okay, Richard.
Well, I mean, obviously I don't make the rules, but I honestly believe that a nitpick can only be there if it's been nominated by Mr. Finn. So I'm afraid I will ban the other two that have been put in. Since I don't care about nitpicks and they don't affect my enjoyment of the story, it's basically how much it made me laugh during the actual podcast. So that's got to be shiny coffee. Yeah, shiny coffee, definitely.
Okay, Bart, is there one that appeals to you?
It's probably going to be the guns are not flashlights. I'm a big guy. I've got a large collection. I've shot a bunch of guns, and they are definitely not flashlights. They may be bright, and it's the bang's gonna blind you, but they're not flashlights.
Yeah, it's not a sensible way of trying to look around a dark room. Yeah. I think we're going to go with an even split here because I think I'm going necklace changing color because this stood out for me as just something that taking me out of the story and not understanding what was going on and why this necklace was suddenly important. I understood the concept that was trying to be conveyed, but why just this one panel of a necklace that we've never seen before? So that was what is getting my vote for this category. So I think we've got, I guess, an even split, and they're all as bad, terrible as each other,
or as great as each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there will be awards going out in the post to a pot of coffee, a necklace, a flashlight gun, and the remains of a pink puff of smoke.
Since we only have mailing addresses for Dan Jorgens and Tony Harris, they're just going to get all these extra awards and really not understand. Dan Jorgens will say, "When did I draw this shiny coffee pot?"
Okay, so that's us. The end. I've got to the end of the awards. Wow, that we've flown through them, and it feels like no time at all has passed. So I think that means that I get to play the jingle one more time.
Oscars, Emmys, it's not about them shows. This award segment has Golden Joes.
Can I ask a question? Am I misremembering in our previous awards episode? Were we also calling these Golden Stormies? Did we decide that didn't work? Was that a reference that was unfortunate, or did it just am I just misremembering?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I thought it sounded a little bit too much like a presidential compromat tape. So okay. On that basis, I've kept it to Golden Joes.
because if you think about it, the Academy Awards have a nickname, the Oscars, right? Emmys, Grammys, these are all nicknames, right? And so maybe the formal name is the Talking Joe Golden Joe statuettes, and then there we go. Maybe it's just a Stormy, right? So Dan Jurgens at some drawing table in like Idaho or Florida, right? I don't know where Dan Jurgens lives, right? Or maybe someone accosts him at a convention later this year if he's making an appearance. Someone runs up to him with a sort of oddly oversized, shiny, not movable action figure and says, "Here's a lady in a fancy dress, right? Here's your Stormy, sir." Right, with a low resolution JPEG printout on like very thin paper of one of his pages from that first article. Your award, sir. And he can turn to some camera that's all of a sudden there, and he can say, I'd like to thank my editor, my writer, my 2 inkers.
And then you charge him $200 for it.
That's right. Do you have to pay for it if you get more than one? Is that what it is? If a team worked on something? Oh, there are 4 producers on this movie.
If I get him to sign something, I got to pay for it. So he might as well pay for his, right? give him an even trade.
So as we're wrapping up, I've turned on our festive lights, and one is stuck up Richard's nose, unfortunately. It's the hazards of the job.
I was wondering if, as we wrap up our episode, I have talked so much about these issues in our regular episodes, and Mark is often so gracious to let Jay and I run with it. I was wondering if each of the 3 of you wanted to say something about what Frontline means to you, or, Richard had talked about how it gets better, either at the time or looking back on it. So Bart, does G.I. Joe Frontline, do you have any sort of wrap-up thoughts?
When it first came on, I was really excited because I thought it was going to be a new direction, like an alternate timeline reality kind of thing for it. But then it just really didn't take off, and they canceled it after 18 issues, which I didn't understand, because like I said before, going forward, it was getting a lot better, except for maybe the last 2 issues or so I thought were just kind of stupid. But I think that's them just having fun with the wrap up. But that whole Chuckles story, with the family history stuff, from there moving forward, it could have got really good. So it's just a bummer they didn't get the sales or have the confidence to move forward. The main story at that point was just kind of and this was a good way to change it up, kind of like what they're doing now. The main story I think is poop, and the Hammett continuation I think is decent. This could have been the same thing.
Richard.
I mean, having come to it a bit later, this is the one I missed first time round. I don't have deep feelings about it. I will always defend the Devil's Due stuff. I think I always in my head compare it to Special Missions, which is not fair, because Special Missions, I will still say, really is probably the best G.I. Joe comic. But it's that feeling they were trying to tell different sorts of stories, and I like that, which is why, for example, issue 17 isn't a different story, and whereas I love issue 18. Looking at it now, though, other than 17, and I do think the Harmer story is diabolical. And I think you were very forgiving of him, because I think it shows all the problems that have happened since he's gone back. Goes nowhere, does nothing. Oh, dear. Other than that, I'm sorry, I could go on about that forever, but I'd probably be banned. Other than that, I like the stories. I mean, when you're not reading it in context at the time, I think you lose something for how it felt then. But I like all of the other stories, and indeed, actually, having listened to the podcast, I've come to like one or two of them slightly more. I've certainly come down a lot better with the history repeating story than I did the first time I read it, simply by context of what's being said. It's a stab at doing something different, but I'm not sure the heart was entirely in it at the time. Probably just fell victim to the endless, exciting rounds of what was going on with Devil's Due. It does seem to have been an almost endless adventure behind the scenes, from what one can gather. I like it. I'll still read it. I'll still read any of them again. That's the thing. You talk about not reading them again. I'd read any of them again, even the ones I don't like. I know that's not normal, but it's decent.
I think for me, there's a combination of things happening here. The kind of the initial opening gambit of Larry Hama returning and us trying to find out more about that 5-year period of, the defeat of Cobra and its reemergence as a threat was quite an exciting concept, which wasn't really met by the execution of the story, and that sort of took at the time took a bit of a wind out of that kind of initial gambit of what the Frontline might be more about. Then it became, I guess, more of a sandpit for other writers and artists to come in and sort of have a play and their take on the G.I. Joe world, and that was always interesting, if sometimes more successful than others. I think it reached that history repeating for me high point where you've got a 4-part long form story where it feels like their world building and sort of having a sort of real energy around the story, which then just isn't followed up by the subsequent issues, and it sort of ends on a little bit of a damp squib. So a mixture there for me, but certainly not a regrettable reread. And I've enjoyed spending the last few episodes of Talking Joe sort of really delving in and into the detail of those issues, but also looking ahead to what comes next, because we can get back into the main series. And I've forgotten so much of that era that will be fun to kind of reacquaint myself.
My final thoughts for Frontline are, in 1989, DC Comics started the first new solo Batman monthly comic since 1940 in the form of Legends of the Dark Knight, which was initially 5-issue arcs, and they were set in Batman's first year or less tied to continuity, and it was a chance for different writer and artist teams to come up and tell a story. And then after those first 20 issues, the arcs are shorter. And so Frontline and other comics that have done this, with Spider-Man, there's like Web Spinners or Tangled Web. I guess they've done it twice. G.I. Joe is so ripe for this. So I love the idea. The actual execution I would call an interesting experiment, but I don't think it deserves to be cast off to the sort of the side of G.I. Joe history. And in this era right now of very large collections, like at the time when it was running, trade paperbacks were, 5, 6, 7 issues worth, and they were very rarely more than that. Something like Watchmen, which is like 12 issues. I think it'd be cool now to have a big paperback of all the issues. And I might go, I know you're not supposed to do this, but I actually might take history repeating and put it out of sequence and have it as the final 4 issues of the arc of the collection, so that it does end on a more sort of regular G.I. Joe note. And I would absolutely get some new cover art for it that does what I think graphic novel collection cover art should do, which is a new piece of art that represents the issues contained within, rather than like default the issue number 1 cover, or occasionally some other cover that, like the image, Mark, that you showed at the beginning of this episode, which is the collection for volume 3, the cover for the volume 3 collection, where Zanya's sitting.
Icebound.
Zanya's sitting.
Right. Sorry, on the video. Yeah, on the video.
Yeah, Zanya's sitting at a computer, and on the screen are 4 faces, like something like that, or just all the main characters from this standing around cool with their weapons. and 2 or 3 of the bad guys sort of in the background.
Now, if
Yeah,
you
I
put
can't
them
believe it's
out of-
taken us this long to make the connection to Legends of the Dark Knight as well. It's a very good analogy. Sorry, Bart.
If you put them out of order and end it on that run, does that leave the book at a cliffhanger in a way?
Remind us, how does history repeating end?
Kind of, it's got him, the Wingfield, sort of out the plane with his mother, and they kind of vanished off. And then there's Chuckles, who's sort of mission accomplished. I need to go seek out my girlfriend, who's only just been introduced to this issue.
I was trying to think of how to put it into words, but yeah, that's basically it. They're gonna kill Wingfield, but the mom like tackles them, and they fall out of a plane, and they're both hugging a parachute kind of thing. So it does kind of end, but in a way it doesn't, because you don't know what's going to happen. Like when his dad died, you thought that was the end of that whole militia, but now he comes back, which means they've been there the whole time building their forces. So that could leave the whole trade in kind of a cliffhangery kind of thing.
It is an academic discussion because no one's going to reorder these issues in a collection. Yeah. The other thing that I like collections to do, if the final story page isn't sort of the right finale note to end on, is to have a couple pages of like the variant covers or some behind the scenes sketches or something. I don't like it when I'm reading a book if I get to a collection, I get to the final page and I turn it, and then there's just an ad for some other collections from that publisher. Or like, that's the last page, and then I'm staring at a blank inside back cover. I do think, when you leave a movie theater, when you finish a novel, when you finish a comic book, there's something to taking us out of the experience. And I feel strongly about that for graphic novel collections of serialized comics.
They could do an editorial wrap up where they could say, hey, this is the direction we were going to go in, but because of XYZ, we couldn't, that kind of thing.
You know what? I bet Funky Bunch Mark would graciously allow any publisher to excerpt as a printed interview excerpt some of the writers who have been on this show talking about the experience of working on this book.
Indeed, our own words of wisdom. That'd be fun.
I'd buy several copies if someone did all the issues in a book, and then there's 2 columns of text transcribing Mark and Jay and I going on and on about these comics. I hope the copy editor would pick out the parts where I'm being thoughtful rather than nitpicky.
Well, the next G.I. Joe Kickstarter, there it is.
Oh yeah,
HasLab that.
Excellent. So let's wrap up with anything that we want to promote. Let's start with Tim, because I know that you have things that you can talk about. Where can people find you if it's not in the upper right corner of a G.I. Joe podcast live stream video?
My comic book store is Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts, and my blog is realamericanbook.com.
And Richard, is there anything that you want to plug or shout out?
I'm glad to say I have nothing to plug other than listen to Talking Joe. It's quite good.
Thank you. And Bart, where can people find you? Is there anything you want to shout out?
I don't have anything other than Facebook. I got a Facebook customs page where I put some of my customs on, Mach 5 Customs, if anybody wants to look that up. And if I ever get off my lazy butt, I'm going to have a couple YouTube channels just showcasing some of my process in doing my customs. And the other channel, I'm not exactly sure yet, but just getting back into the country a month and a half ago. I'm still trying to get caught up on things. If you look over there, I got a pile of comics that I got to read from my time away. Then I just got all my Valiverse stuff I got to play with, so pretty busy.
Got to do some proper playing. Excellent.
Research.
Yeah. So if people want to find us and more about the show, you can head on over to talkingjoe.co.uk. That is the website that has all of the stuff all about us and links to the podcasts, the other YouTube videos, and all of our social media stuff. So last time we concluded the Talking Joes, I was given a ribbon by Steve Jubber for having recycling his old catchphrase for our outro, which was, when all is said and done, you can get just down the road, because we've been Talking Joe and we're all out of Joes, which doesn't make a huge amount of sense, but it is what we used to say. And subsequent to that, it did put us on the thinking chair, which is a thing now, and came up with a new ending, which Tim enjoys shouting out. But you are welcome to join in. The outro is, and I think that's us done. But
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, a real American podcast
with two guys from England this time, and two, why not? Laters.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.